is our 16th year, which, come on, give me a round of applause. It deserves a round of applause. Our 16th year of producing this report, and our team, our strategic planning and research team, does not just put together a bunch of numbers. We have an elite team of researchers who deeply investigate issues every year. And obviously every year we're going to look at the socioeconomic well-being of our residents, but their keen eyes are able to identify specific trends of note. And so we're going to dig into that today. But we've seen rapidly changing times right now. You cannot wake up without text alerts, new tweets, new headlines, all of that. So much is changing. And you have to be able to respond to that. And right now, in our city, in our state, in our country, in our organizations, leadership is so critical. And we will not be able to survive these times, or have been able in the past, without someone who has resolve, fortitude, and exemplary vision to bring their team through, bring their constituents through, bring their clients through, bring their city and their state through. And with that being said, I'd like to invite up the Executive Director of Metro Social Services, Renee Pratt.
Good morning. I am so excited to say good morning and welcome to the 16th Annual Community Needs Evaluation. I am just so excited today. In the past few years, when we've had the release, our staff, meaning the social services staff, weren't able to attend this event. And today I'm proud to say that we closed our doors and brought staff in to this important event. So thank you all for being here, and thank you for all the work you all do as well. Also, I'd like to acknowledge our elected officials who are with us today. Many attend on an annual basis and probably hasn't missed a CNE since the exception one, okay? So again, thank you so much for being here as well. Also, before I bring up the mayor, I would like to say I just truly appreciate the mayor of this city. Everything that we've gone through in the past 2 weeks, and his response and his immediate response represents Nashville and what we're about, and that's solving problems and addressing issues. And he has definitely done that. So let's just say thank you for the mayor. And also the time that he's taken out of his schedule this morning shows that this is an important event, and he is invested in our community needs evaluation. This mayor has just been a blessing to us. He's been at our events several times over the past year. I don't think he didn't miss one that we've invited him to, and I'm very thankful and appreciative of that as well. So without further ado, I'd like to bring up our Honorable Mayor of Nashville, Tennessee, Mayor Freddie O'Connell.
Well, thank you, Director Pratt, and just as it's been my honor to attend this event many times through the years, one of the things that has been both compelling and inspiring is seeing that this event draws people from across the spectrum of Nashville, that we see our nonprofit providers here with us, that we see public leaders here with us, and that we see even our Chamber of Commerce here with us, because we know that understanding our community needs helps us all operate the city more effectively for everyone in it. So good morning. And I want to thank Director Pratt for her leadership of Metro Social Services. As you all know, this department provides vital services to help Davidson County residents in need. It was created to be a helping hand for Nashville families that are struggling. Metro Social Services is the largest facilitator of home meal deliveries, facilitating up to 16,000 per month. But one of the most vital services is the annual report that we will be discussing today. This is the 16th year of the report, and I would say, having looked at all of the previous reports, it is as relevant to local governance today as it ever was, because it informs us about our need, which helps us refine our policies and programs that respond to that need as we go forward and do the work of governing every day. And this community needs evaluation is the work of many, many people. In addition to Director Pratt, I want to recognize the Metro Social Services Commission, lead researcher Dr. Garrett Harper, and the full team at MSS Planning and Research, as well as their director, Abdelghani Barre. So would you all help me thank the Metro Social Services team? And then, of course, public leadership is a part of this. I know there are many colleagues in public service with us today. I think I've seen council members Berkeley Allen and Bob Nash here already. I think we also were expecting council members Tom Druffel, Brenda Gadd, Courtney Johnston. I know I saw our assessor of property, Vivian Wilhoit, here, State Representative Harold Love, and then one of our key community partners is Hal Cato with the Community Foundation of Middle Tennessee. And then, of course, special welcome to our Metro Department leaders who joined this, our Metro workforce who are participating in their partners. Thank you all for your service and work on behalf of neighbors who need us the most. So can you all help us celebrate the public leaders in the room? Now, broadly speaking, and I say this having grown up here, Nashville has been an amazing success story that has unfolded around us over this entire century. For those of us who were born here and grew up here, I would say the changes have been nothing short of breathtaking. Half of our skyline has been built in the past decade. Visitors now spend $30 million here every day. We are building a new stadium and multiple new neighborhoods, but other things have changed too. The median home price in Nashville has risen to $500,000. This is more than 5 times greater than our statistical area's median income. A recent study by the planning department found that the median household incomes among our Black and Hispanic residents means that they cannot afford to buy homes in 99% of Nashville neighborhoods. And so the community needs evaluation is an important reminder that not all Nashvillians are benefiting as a part of our overall amazing success story. And this year, it reminds us particularly that there is a high cost to low wages in a way that leaves us all paying the bill. And some of those costs mean decreases in purchasing power for basic necessities in the home, higher health costs, not just for people who are struggling with healthcare access, but for the community as a whole. And worse, deeper debt, deeper poverty, and those things together leading to deeper inequalities. Right now, the living wage for one working adult with no children in Davidson County is $52,858 per year. That is about $23,000 more than the income ceiling for the bottom 20% of Nashville earners. That ceiling is less than $30,000. All of these points of data are embedded in this year's community needs evaluation, and a few more that are worth us all considering. More than 1 in 4 Nashville adults have debt in collection. 1 in 5 Nashville children don't have enough to eat. They are lacking food security. 64% of our Black students in Nashville attend schools with high poverty rates, which is double the percentage for our white students. And more than half of our renters spend 30% or more of their income on rent, which means that their housing is not affordable. Now, I will tell you, I knew many of these things from my service on the Metro Council representing District 19, which was a part of the city that existed in extremes. We had the largest acreage for public housing in the city, and we also had some of the highest cost per square foot housing in the city. And so they were a part of motivating my thoughts about running for this office a few years ago, because I was focused when I took office in 2015 on how we could reduce the poverty rate in the part of the city that I was representing without it being a factor of displacement. And so I remain driven by a focus on affordability and quality of life, and ultimately a better Nashville for Nashvillians. We have known for quite some time that housing and transportation are the top 2 expenses in most households. And in our first year, with support from 2 out of 3 Nashville voters, we passed Choose How You Move together, a generational transit improvement program that will bring more access and affordability to our residents. We have funded and started the first 11 projects there beginning July 6th. WeGo, our local transit authority, is increasing the service frequency of several routes. They are expanding this year WeGo Access, which is a service for riders with disabilities, including weekends for the first time. And later this year, we will launch, for the first time ever, a low-income fare program. We've also taken other big steps forward on housing affordability on the East Bank. As we got started, our master development agreement locks in a century of affordable housing on Metro-owned property. We have leveraged the Barnes Housing Trust Fund, named for the Reverend Bill Barnes, to create and preserve over 1,300 affordable homes in just 2024. We launched a Catalyst Fund, a new partnership fund to Barnes to offer fast, flexible loans to preserve affordable rentals that would otherwise be lost to market prices. We're also working quickly to absorb new information we have about the combination of faith-based, academic, and healthcare institutions that have land that can join with metros and can partner with us in funding. And we have now Clark United Methodist First Affordable Housing Project that we've already cut the ribbon on. The Northview Housing Development for Seniors is a partnership with Born Again Church. And in my own neighborhood, Inspiritus, a Lutheran-led organization, reclaimed and reinvented one of their properties to offer new affordable housing for seniors and people living with disabilities. In our recommended budget that we just presented at the State of Metro and have shared with the Metro Council, we've recommended a commitment of $45 million to implement our first year of a unified housing strategy that we just received that will give us a decade's worth of toolkits to bend that cost of housing down. But the subject of this year's community needs evaluation is wages. And Metro can't easily impact private sector wages. But even in a responsible budget, we are pushing on better wages for Metro employees across the board. Our Human Resource Department monitors the MIT Living Wage Calculator for living wage guidance and uses a 3-year trend of previous calendar years to determine the recommended minimum hourly rate for full-time jobs in our pay plan. The proposed minimum hourly rate for fiscal year 2026 increases from $20 per hour, which I knew we needed to get above the $20 per hour mark last year. We're moving that up to $21.44 per hour, which exceeds the 3-year average in that living wage calculator. And these changes also reflect recommendations of independent experts at Mercer Consulting, which is a national leader in compensation consulting. It had been more than a decade since Metro had last engaged outside compensation experts. And as always, our goals when recommending pay plans are to design plans that are fair and equitable, allow us to recruit and retain skilled employees, and remain fiscally responsible so they can be funded year over year. We think we've gotten there this year. Metro has provided robust pay growth and increased employee pay by 30% over the last 4 years alone, recognizing that inflation and cost of living increases were right here in Nashville. These pay plans allow us as a government to continue our investment in our employees now and provide sustainable competitive pay growth in the future. But we're also working as a government to offset costs. In addition to the transit and housing scenarios I've already mentioned, we have a stronger property tax freeze and relief program thanks to the leadership of Representative Love and others at the state that meant you can now, if you are 65 years or up, contact the trustee's office and participate. Trustee Erica Gilmore just released participation numbers, and we have seen more and more people be able to take advantage of this program, and they are. We have a strengthened financial empowerment center that now has more of a focus on seniors as we calculate the millions of dollars in available benefits people aren't currently using that they can use to help further offset costs. There will be more news to come on that in the weeks ahead. And of course, our Metro Social Services team is working hard every day on the multiple programs that they offer. Programs like curbside trash assistance for seniors, senior welfare calls, which are daily check-ins with senior clients. And these began as responses to data in our community needs evaluation. Understanding these needs helps us improve our response. It's a big reason that I've been attending this event in person for more than a decade. The things that we know are in this evaluation help us keep getting better. But like so much of our work, responding on the topic of wages will require a network of partners larger than Metro. So we will be working to share this evaluation broadly to make sure that people understand the high cost of low wages. Now, as we thank our Metro Social Services team and we think about the importance of this work, I do want to take a moment of privilege to recognize one MSS team member in particular. Abdelghani Barre is the director of the Strategic Planning and Research Team at Metro Social Services, and I am sad and sorry to report for us, although I'm sure he is excited, this is his last Community Needs Evaluation report. AB is retiring after 31 years of service, and I would like, I'd like to invite Director Pratt as well as AB to join us here at the front of the stage to say thank you, because his work, his decades of service and commitment to this city show up in this report, show up in how we best serve our most vulnerable residents. And AB, I just want to take a moment to personally say thank you. So I'm just really here to say thank you. Our Metro Social Services team, the commission that offers them guidance, the city that supports their work in our budget. We know that we are charged with responding to these needs every day, and I will share with you that as mayor, it is our full intention to do our best to respond not just to this year's evaluation, but to continue through the themes of recent years. To continue building a better Nashville for Nashvillians. It is an honor to have been with you this morning. Thank you so much. Director Pratt, thank you.
Thank you so much, Mayor O'Connell. And again, congratulations to you, Abdelghani. And we thank you again for your leadership, your foresight, your vision, and all the work that you've done. A couple of quick housekeeping notes. You all should have this in your program. This is the trustee survey. We are asking that you please fill this out and leave it in your seat for collection before leaving. Please do not forget to do that. Also, someone has reported a missing cell phone. That someone may or may not be me. So if you see a cell phone with a clear case on it, please take it to our registration table. It is a government phone. You are in the house of the Lord, so please do not feel inclined to leave with it. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Also, there are two gentlemen in here, or maybe not. Just know, Willie, if you could wave your hand. That is Willie over there. Robert, if you could wave your hand in the back. These two gentlemen will have note cards that they'll be handing out, because once we get to our panel discussion, you will be able to either come to the mic to ask your question, or you can write your question down and hand it in. So go ahead and get your wheels turning in case you have a question, and we will get note cards to you. Just give a little wave and they will get those note cards over to you. Without further ado, the moment you have come here for, it is the overview, the unpacking of the long-awaited Community Needs Evaluation. And to help us do that is a man who has more doctorates than I do, purses, shoes, and hair pieces, honey. This man is educated. He knows his stuff. Dr. Garrett Harper, please come unpack the report.
Thank you, and welcome to the presentation of the latest Community Needs Evaluation. This year, the theme of the data and the research reflect an important aspect of the local economy, the high cost of low wages. For the past 16 years, Metropolitan Social Services has compiled data, analysis, and research that provides information and insight on the social and economic well-being of the population of Davidson County. In recent years, these themes have formed a sequence that responded to local, state, and national context of the well-being of Nashville residents. We've considered the importance of well-being as a concept by itself, the role of the big squeeze, whereby Nashvillians experience difficulty in making ends meet in their household budgets. We looked at the cost and challenge of aging in Nashville. Last year, we provided analysis on the relationship between development patterns and economic well-being of the population. A next and critical topic is the earning profile of Nashville workers. Specifically, what gaps, issues, and challenges occur across the labor market relative to economic well-being. We'll do two things in the presentation. First, a brief profile of key aspects of the labor market. That will offer a backdrop to how the economy is structured. And second, we will look at the high-cost impacts of low wages on workers, on their families, and on society overall. First, a couple of definitions that direct our analysis on this topic. The living wage. This is a metric developed over 20 years ago at MIT to better address quantifying the local wage rate that a full-time worker would need to cover the cost of his or her family's basic needs in the particular community where they live. It's a means to show whether a worker's and a family's earning meet or exceed that living wage, or whether earnings fall short of that. Thus, it very much addresses what is meant by being in or not in a situation of poverty. Poverty, however, as a term and concept can be misunderstood. The poverty rate and poverty measures are a set of income thresholds used by the federal government to assess those living in poverty. Yet many consider those guidelines antiquated, outmoded, and overly simplistic in relation to the lived experience of the population. The official poverty measures were developed informally at first by the U.S. Department of Agriculture. This calculation was to take the food budget of a family in the early 1960s and to multiply that by 3. That was it. This logic was and is applied across the nation. The same measures for who is and is not living in poverty is the same across the 48 continental United States. Whether it's New York City or Nashville or the most rural counties in the nation, regardless of how costly it may be to live in those places. Regular updates on the basis of inflation have kept this simplistic way of assessing poverty alive to this very day. The MIT living wage calculation for Davidson County illustrates more completely what is needed for individuals and families of different composition. The full data incorporates specific current requirements for food, childcare, medical care, housing, transportation, technology, and civic involvement tailored to the different family compositions. Here, one adult in Davidson County currently requires $52,850 a year as a full-time worker to meet basic living needs. With one child, that adult would require earnings of $82,000 a year, and with 2 children, that rises to $99,000. As the household and family look different, so will the required earnings. For a household where there are 2 adults and only one works, these are the requirements for earnings ranging from $70,000 to $90,000. Note that configurations of child care responsibilities factor in as an offset to those costs here. Lastly, a household where 2 adults are working would also have a different set of earning needs. Here, those income requirements range from $70,000 to $109,000, depending on the number of children. By way of contrast, these are the federal poverty guidelines that apply in Davidson County. These are the same guidelines that are used in every county in the country. According to the federal guidelines, a single person with no children would be considered to live below poverty if he or she earns less than $15,650. Any level of income higher than that would place the person to be above the poverty level. The lack of coherence of metrics that bear little resemblance to the lived reality in a place here is stark. A person with an annual income of $16,000 in Davidson County would not have enough money to even pay current average apartment rent, much less have anything further on hand for survival needs of food, clothing, or anything. In fact, 3 times the poverty threshold, or 300% of poverty for one person, does not equal the living wage required for one adult worker. To just carry that idea a little further, the federal poverty guidelines as apply in Davidson County state that a family of 8 persons would require only over $54,150 to not be living in a poverty situation. We'll just dwell on that for a moment. A family of 8 could live on $55,000 a year in Davidson County and be considered above the federal poverty threshold. The troubling aspects of this are several. One of those is that these are the measures that drive an annual reflection on whether a community's poverty rate has gone up or has gone down. Currently, the poverty rate in Davidson County is about 12%. But what is being measured is a reflection of metrics that do not conform to the reality of living in the community. The question then must be, is it not more useful, meaningful, and appropriate to ask how many persons are living above or below a wage that is a living wage, reflecting the actual cost of living, the actual composition of families, and the actual differences between one county and the other 3,000 counties in the U.S. Assuming that the living wage calculation provides a more useful and correct answer to who is poor, in poverty, and struggling, we can see then what the labor market looks like in those terms. Within the Nashville area, the region, one can turn to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics and see where are the occupations with the largest number of workers. When we consider the 25 largest occupations in the Nashville area, it turns out that 20 of those have median earnings that are lower than the living wage for one adult in Davidson County. Just one additional definition in thinking about these data points. We all recognize that median refers to the middle, but it's easy to think about a particular occupation and its median wage as if all or many of the persons in that job are earning that wage. In fact, we know instead that it tells us that exactly half are earning less than that wage. So we see a table with many words and numbers. Simply, however, these are the 20 of the occupations in the Nashville area with the most workers. These 20 all have annual earnings that are less than the living wage for one adult in Davidson County. All of these occupations have many thousands or tens of thousands of workers each. For instance, while there are 590 dentists in the Nashville area, not on this list, there are 37,000 laborers and freight movers. While there are 560 electrical engineers in our region, there are 28,000 retail salespersons. Put simply, Nashville and most any community will have far more of the jobs shown on this list than they will the individual occupations that sometimes and often have higher earnings. The large pool of jobs with large number of workers, typically paying low wages, form the critical mass of the workforce of most cities. The other reality here is that while education and training for persons to advance to new, better paying careers is important and is necessary, these jobs with these large numbers of workers still require workers, and workers at the pay levels that are shown here. Just a couple of examples out of this large set in the table. In the Nashville area, there are nearly 20,000 cashiers. The median wage for that job in this market is $29,900 a year. Half of the cashiers in this area earn less than $29,900. One more example, there are about 10,000 janitors and cleaners in the Nashville area. Half of them earn less than the wage shown here, $34,930. It also becomes clear that if there are two adult earners in a household in some combination of the occupations shown on this list, the sum of those two incomes in most cases will not reach the living wage, particularly if there are children in the household. From that long list of 20 largest occupations in our area, there is a grand total of 326,000 workers just from those 20 occupations. In short, Nashville, as most cities, has many, many low-wage jobs that outnumber many other occupations that require more skill and have greater earnings. And these are only the top 20. It is through these types of data that it becomes clearer that approximately half of the workers in Nashville and the Nashville area, as in many cities, experience living wage poverty. With this profile, we now look at the high cost that comes from low wages. The high cost to workers themselves, the high cost to their families, and the high cost to society as a whole. Workers in these types of jobs experience a variety of costs, some more obvious than others. Workers in low-wage jobs experience a variety of specific adverse health impacts. 16% in the earnings categories we just saw lack health insurance in Nashville. Research shows that low-wage work can be considered an occupational health hazard, one where workers experience higher levels of cognitive decline, higher BMI, and higher rates of hypertension. A study by the Journal of the American Medical Association found that workers with sustained low wages were 38% more likely to die in the course of a 12-year study period. Many low-wage workers experience unstable hours and shifts, and many take on a number of low-wage jobs simultaneously to make ends meet. In 2025, over 9 million Americans worked multiple jobs, and that's the highest rate in 15 years. Multiple job holders are typically not in high-earning positions. Rather, they are concentrated in healthcare, hospitality, food services, and retail sectors. Often, low-wage workers find it difficult to afford to live near their job. In Nashville, only 37% of jobs are within 10 miles of workers' homes, and the median commute distance is 11 miles. We recognize that Nashville is a very car-oriented city. Average weekday mileage is over 40 miles. The map in the center, provided to us with our partner, Dr. Wansu M. at Meharry Medical College, this shows the percent of workers that used public transportation in recent census data reports. These patterns and others found in the full Community Needs Evaluation report provide opportunities to see not only where workers live and work, but where there are areas where there are large numbers of workers living who are in particular occupational groups. Low-wage workers bear high costs to health, unstable work, and long commutes. Their families also bear many high costs. Low wages inherently imply that there is little opportunity for families to save. For many years, the Federal Reserve System has surveyed Americans about the amount of emergency cash that those families would have on hand. Typically, as in the most recent survey data, 37% of adults would have to borrow money or sell something if they needed to come up with just $400 in cash. The day-to-day and week-to-week experience of low-wage families is prone to unexpected expenses, accumulating debt, facing rapid increases in costs such as housing and groceries, often weak access to banking, and typically family and friends that are simply struggling in the same way that they are, unable to offer loans or financial help to one another. 2 years ago, the subject of the community needs evaluation was the cost and challenge of aging in Nashville. That issue remains as vital as ever. By 2030, over 30 million Americans will turn 65 from this year forward. The median retirement savings in our country is $225,000. Persons in low-wage jobs simply are unable to save in meaningful ways for a distant or a near-term retirement. Some notable differences exist by sex, race, and education levels. The average retirement savings for those with a high school degree is $75,000. For those with less than high school, savings for retirement is $7,000. In short, many are likely to deplete whatever savings they have long before their expenses stop. Many low-wage earners of necessity have become highly dependent on Social Security for their very survival. Hunger and food insecurity are very real daily parts of the lives of many Nashvillians. About 1 in 5 Nashville children does not have enough to eat. Low-wage earners, as others, struggle to afford groceries that have increased by 25% in 5 years. And then housing. A household is deemed to be cost-burdened when it spends more than 1/3 of its income on housing. Certainly high-income households may choose to pay large shares of their income for housing because there's plenty of money left over for other needs. But these data and these maps control for income. Here on the left, we see that there are 52,000 households in Davidson County with incomes under $50,000, certainly low wage and below the living wage, that do pay more than 1/3 of their income for rent. And the map shows the distribution. On the right, we see over 15,000 homeowners that have incomes under $50,000 and pay more than 1/3 of their income for their mortgage costs. And these patterns by council district show where there are higher concentrations of both groups. For households with children, low wages become a steep barrier to making ends meet. Toddler and infant care range between $9,000 and $11,000 a year. Infant care in Tennessee is more costly than in-state tuition at the state four-year colleges. Nashville households spend about double on child care expenses what the federal government says is affordable. In these situations, it may not be surprising that large numbers of American households, here over 100,000, are driven into poverty due to child care costs. And children growing up in living wage poverty families often experience hardships in their childhood and youth on through their adulthood. Children in low-wage households often experience worse health than other children. They have worse education outcomes, including higher dropout rates and fewer opportunities for education. A child in a low-income household may lack the environments and the role models that others have. In employment and economic terms, research shows that the experiences of poverty in younger years creates long-lasting effects on the positive side for those persons as adults. So families experience many hardships that are attached to low-wage jobs. Ironically, safety net programs themselves can trap workers in cycles of poverty. Incomes are already so low that adding even modest amounts of work and earnings can actually put those families in a worse situation in terms of being able to afford housing, food, and other necessities. Research has suggested that this benefits cliff, as it's known, is the single greatest barrier to self-sufficiency for low-income, low-wage families in the U.S. Workers experience costs for their low-wage jobs. Families further see other challenges. But what about society as a whole? In what ways may we all, as a society, pay a price for the widespread prevalence of low-wage jobs in Nashville as in other communities. Workers themselves are caught in traps of unstable work, inability to participate in a wider consumer society. But business bears a cost as well. Research suggests that business may fail to recognize their own high turnover costs and productivity losses that are related to low-wage jobs. The bottom line of business may be impacted in numerous ways through sustained instability by reliance on low-wage workforce. The broader economy of a city can be impacted by large numbers of low-wage workers. Tax revenues are lower than they might otherwise be. Continuous rise in the standard of living would mean greater economic well-being for all persons in the community. Perpetual reliance on public assistance is one way that everyone pays the price for low wages. Wages that are low often remain stagnant. The federal minimum wage of $7.25 has not been raised in 16 years. Young workers entering the workforce will experience a minimum wage that has never increased in their lifetime. The real value of the U.S. federal minimum wage is the lowest it has been since 1956. Low-wage households simply can't spend much in their communities. They don't have the money. And housing, the largest single item in the household budget, becomes a hardship and a price that society as a whole tries to tackle. As children struggle in their education due to low-wage poverty, the education system struggles to overcome those difficult challenges. That struggle itself is a cost, a considerable cost, that the entire community must cover. In Metro Nashville Public Schools, a far lower share of economically disadvantaged graduates go on to college than their non-disadvantaged peers. This is a cycle of poverty in a microcosm. Low-wage jobs and low-wage poverty do have residual and long-lasting effects that are costly for everyone. With the high cost of healthcare services, many low-wage workers and their families choose to delay or forego medical care. Over half of persons in all categories of health insurance do so, typically those with lower earnings and an ability to pay. The result? Health problems get worse and the cost escalates. These costs then get absorbed into the health system in ways that impact everyone. Research indicates that poverty, living wage poverty, can be a factor in higher crime rates, increased vulnerability to violence, and even rates of incarceration. In terms of transportation impacts, the high cost of owning and operating a vehicle is difficult for low-wage workers. The choice then is to move to long distances from work to afford housing, which simply intensifies pressure on road networks and transportation systems. Again, a cost pressure for society, not to mention environmental damages. In reality, many low-wage workers in America simply must depend on the safety net to survive. About 70% of recipients of SNAP benefits and Medicaid or TennCare enrollees are working full-time. The low wages simply don't pay the bills. Disproportionately high shares of workers in certain industries work full-time but do not earn enough. Their living wage is only made possible, if you will, through a safety net that attempts to make up the difference to purchase food, medical care, and other essentials. There are a number of federal safety net programs that are critical to survival for many of the workers in jobs that were shown on those tables just a few minutes ago. Retail clerks, cashiers, janitors, laborers, others. Over 300,000 in just 20 occupations in the Nashville area. However, the safety net itself leaves many behind through meager thresholds tied to that 60-year-old poverty guideline. Then there is the benefits cliff, which acts as a catch-22 for low-wage workers and families that would strive to earn more. And then some choose to or fail to participate when they are eligible for a variety of reasons. The Urban Institute suggests that full funding and full participation in all of the 7 major safety net programs would reduce poverty by substantial amounts across all demographic groups in Tennessee. As in each previous community needs evaluation, we note that many of the issues and challenges are structural and not unique to Nashville. The same is true with data in this year's report. In each topic and report, however, we recognize that there is a context of any city within its respective state, region, and the nation. Here, the Center for American Progress notes that southern states have the lowest average participation and funding for many key safety net programs. At the same time, the southern region is the one with higher poverty rates, more food insecurity, lower wages, and incomes. The daunting challenges to structural inequities and problems can be daunting, but analysis and contextualization can provide insights. The high cost of low wages is felt by workers, by their families, and by cities and society overall. Reminders have come from many sources that societies simply cannot look to charity, faith communities, and nonprofit agencies, however well-intended, to overcome the magnitude of the high cost that workers, families, and indirectly, we all pay. The quotes here speak to these ideas. We can't food bank our way out of hunger in the U.S. Every church, synagogue, and mosque is trying to help. Food charity has become normalized through a fraying social safety net. In the past, various research has said that charity can be no more than a Band-Aid. This report is offered not as a path replete with solutions to complex social and economic problems. Rather, the data, the analysis, and the context are provided as a means to perceive differently what may be blind spots or barriers to issues of economic hardship in Nashville and other communities. We invite your engagement with this analysis. Thank you for your engagement across the previous 15 years of the Community Needs Evaluation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Garrett. Right now, we're going to take just a very quick 10-minute break, and then when we come back, we've got an amazing panel discussion. As a reminder, go ahead and start thinking of your questions if you have any. We're going to give you a note card to write those, or you can say it on the mic. But again, everyone enjoy a very quick break, and we'll be right back. And our moderator will be asking your questions throughout or at some point in our panel discussion. And speaking of our panel discussion, I want to bring up some truly amazing people who are going to come before you today. We have Stephanie Coleman, who's President and CEO of the Nashville Area Chamber of Commerce, Metro Councilwoman Courtney Johnston, and State Representative Harold Love Jr. If you could, please join me up on stage. They are going to spend this morning some time unpacking this report and getting into the meat of it. We've heard all the details. Now we're going to talk about it. You know, the stuff y'all going to do when you leave here, talk about it. And to facilitate this panel discussion is a woman who I have known, who I've watched, who I've admired, who I've tried to emulate in my journalism career my entire life. A woman who doesn't always speak much, but lives more so by her example. And I will never forget, I used to write teases for her, and I would always look back and like, did she change it? Did she change it? And sometimes she did. And that is where, between you and one other journalist there at Channel 4, that is where I learned to write my teases, from a pro a true icon, a legend, a veteran here, Demetria Kaladimos.
Thank you, Harriet, for those kind words. And no, I didn't change her teases or her copy very much because she went on to big and great things and continues to do well. It is so nice to be with you this morning for such an important discussion. You know, this community is not perfect, but if any group of people can come together to address problems honestly and effectively, it's Nashvillians. At least that's the way I feel. Panelists, what jumped off the page to you? What shocked you in this data?
Two things really jumped out to me. One was that 1 in 5 Nashville children are hungry, don't have enough to eat. That's a lot of children in our community. And the other is that more than 1 in 5 Americans are experiencing the benefits cliff. So they are in a position where if they get some more hours or a raise, a promotion, they may be worse off financially.
I don't know that anything surprised me in this report, I hate to say. In the course of my 6 years on council, I've done a lot of work across a lot of different things, and I think the most real life that hits you in the face is when you're dealing with our homeless community. And so you think you know about the homeless community until you actually deal with them and work with them. And so literally, I mean, I would love to have some brilliant, this really surprised me, but none of it surprised me.
I think the issue of the gaps between what people are actually earning and what is required to live comfortably is always startling. And to Councilor's point, those of us in policy areas, we generally know these things because we're always getting reports, we're always getting questions about income, but to see the numbers in this report, I think really brings it home because the data is the data. And you can look across the city and look at the football and hockey and soccer teams, and it gives an illusion that it's a different city. But then when you look at the data, you really get to see what is underneath that beautiful skyline.
And we're talking about costs that continue to increase year to year. I checked last year's survey. The income was $49,000 and change for an adult with no children. Now we're up to almost $53,000 just in 1 year. How many folks do you know personally who don't come close to that? And talk a little bit about those families.
So in my district, I have a large elderly population. And so I don't know necessarily what their specific dollar amount is. I know that for the most part, they are living in a home that is paid for. So it is utilities that vary. It is food cost that has increased. It is taxes that hurts them. And so that's one of my bigger concerns. I lean towards the elderly and the children. And so that's a huge concern. I've gotten a lot of calls, especially after the proposed budget, from several. I have a 101-year-old that has lived in her home since it was built in 1953.
And she's still there.
She is still there, and her adult children came to my meeting, and she is going to have to move if this property tax increase happens because she cannot sustain it. And so it's very real, the cost of living. And it is true, and the report pointed out that every county is different, right? The cost of living in DeKalb County is very different than the cost of living in Davidson County. And the federal threshold there is obviously antiquated. There's a lot antiquated when it comes to formulas that the federal government has put together. And in the state too, actually. We've got probably some work to do. But that's more my concern, specifically with my district, is my elderly population.
Stephanie?
A couple of examples of individuals I know, I think because I work at the Chamber of Commerce and because we interact with a lot of businesses on a day-to-day basis, I get questions from family members, questions from neighbors who are trying to make ends meet. And many of them are actually below that income threshold, and they're working multiple jobs, and they're just trying to find that one better job, the job that will pay just a little bit more. And so I will have conversations with them about what I'm aware of. You know, what are the job opportunities that might help them? What training or credential might be helpful to make them more competitive? But it's, you know, sometimes that's a grueling conversation and process because it's a lot of work just to make a little bit more money when you're working, living paycheck to paycheck and working multiple jobs and supporting a family.
I have a church member who works 2 jobs, and I see him more certain times of the year because his second job, he works at a restaurant, and of course the tips are better when it's football season. Mm-hmm. But he can't be there when it's not. And I asked him, I said, why aren't you at service? He said, Reverend, I got to work the second job because the tips are better so I can pay my rent. I can't be here on those Sundays. I can come maybe for Bible study, but I can't be here on Sunday. And he is not an older gentleman. He's under 40. And so I think sometimes when we do point out the issues for those who are elderly, but there is another class of persons who have college degrees, who have not found a job in the particular profession that they went to school for, and are having to work multiple jobs in order to be able to live in the city of Nashville.
We've proven with this report once again that when people can't pay their bills and they're facing hardship, that they turn to government assistance programs. What toll is that taking on the city and your respective areas, and what are we doing about this?
Well, I think one of the challenges we have in government is the way that we view programs that provide assistance to people who are having a difficult situation. For example, a few years back, we discovered that there was over $700 million worth of TANF benefits that the state of Tennessee had not allocated toward its constituents. When the report initially came out, the initial response was, it's an entitlement program, we're not going to increase the benefits, and we're not going to keep people in this cycle of being dependent on government services. But then we asked for the demographics. We said, well, who is receiving? Who's receiving these? We found that there were grandmothers who were having to then take care of their children because their son or daughter was incarcerated because of drug addiction. And we also discovered that the demographic was not the traditional government entitlement demographic of African Americans on government programs. It's Caucasian females in East Tennessee. Then the conversation changed to, well, we should probably release those dollars. I said, well, hold on, now how did this change just because of the composition of the demographics? So we need to be careful about how we demonize people who are on these programs and how we sometimes stigmatize them for that moment when they are going through a little bit of difficulty. We've noticed this in COVID when we had to shut down businesses. Everybody had to go through the line for unemployment, and they saw the difference in what it takes to get these benefits and how it can be difficult, but how it helps in those difficult moments. And so I think there's a conversation to be held about that, how we view these programs and how we view the importance of them in light of people not having everything they need financially to survive.
I think one of the things that would be really helpful is if our state, not you, our state legislature, and it may be surprising for some people to hear me say this, to really start looking at Medicaid expansion. That is something that would make a marked difference in a lot of people's lives. But the truth is that everything costs money. And so you have to balance the need with, because where does the money come from? The money comes from the taxpayers. Whether it's federal government, state government, local government, it all comes out of your pocket in some way, form, or fashion, right? Is it property taxes? Is it sales taxes? Is it activity fees? All those sorts of things. And so you have to balance that, because increasing in those fees or taxes increases the cost of living. So you have to balance what you're charging in order to expand these needed programs without cost burdening too much the taxpayer. And it is a very, very fine line, and we are in this conversation in a very serious way right now in Davidson County on the local level. And so I think one of the things that we need to do better as a county is to stop operating in silo. We have departments that consistently operate in silo, and community organizations that consistently operate in silo, when we could be coordinating effort and stop duplicating effort and being much more lean and mean about it. When we realized that, so operating for example, I'm going back to homelessness, operating a permanent supportive housing is much, much, much less expensive than it is to operate a daily shelter, by far. So when we start learning those things, it's where can we expand programming where we get the best bang for our buck? And to your point, taking away the stigma of things, and there is stigma around that. It's like, well, most people don't understand what permanent supportive housing is. So let's educate people. But I think that we could do a lot better job of being efficient in what we're expanding, why we're expanding it, and the coordination among government, private, and nonprofit organizations that have the same goal. Let's get there together. And so more of a strategic type plan.
So I know that I think it was last year, you all heard about the Our Chance initiative run by the Martha O'Brien Center, and I know that Marcia's here and Timberly's here and others. But I just want to call that out. So Representative Love mentioned the TANF funds, and this was one of the pilot projects from DHS, and it's a really important pilot and a really important issue for the broader community, but specifically the business community, to understand exists, because they may have employees who are on public benefits, who are at a low wage, as we've discussed today, and an employer might attempt to give a raise or a promotion or more hours, and their employee may decline, but they don't say why. So there's a real need for, to the extent possible, for employers to more deeply understand the people who work for them and what their personal situations are, if possible. And if not possible, because these are very private and personal conversations, just to be made aware of what resources exist, particularly right now in this moment in time while we have this pilot. And I was talking to Marcia in the break about some upcoming lunch and learn opportunities. Timberly does a fantastic job talking to employers about why they should care and why they should come and learn more. And when we first started talking to the Martha O'Brien Center about this, and I've got some team members over here who've been involved, the first thing we were thinking about is, well, what industries does this impact the most? And there's, you think about the obvious, well, hospitality, retail, restaurants, but actually it's across, as we saw in the report, multiple industries have employees who are relying on public benefits of all kinds, childcare, food, all kinds, housing. And if they take just a little bit more in pay, they hit that cliff. And we've got to make sure that that's more widely understood and known, because while we're trying to promote policy change there, and that's, at the federal level, so that's, a heavy lift to create more of a transitional benefit instead of a cliff, there are things that employers can do to help mitigate that.
Stephanie, I'm going to stay with you. How difficult is it becoming to sell an unaffordable city?
We are hearing more from employers who are, I would say, both recruiting talent from elsewhere, as well as employers who are relying on talent here who are having to move to more affordable areas. So, we hear a lot about transportation. We were fortunate in Nashville to pass the transit referendum to begin to get that dedicated funding and address our infrastructure challenges. But it's going to take a while. That's not an immediate flip the switch solution. everything is connected. So you think about housing affordability, you think about transportation, you think about issues like childcare, workforce as a whole. All of these issues are interrelated. And we know that in order to impact the issue that we've talked about today, we have to look at it both from an increasing in income standpoint and affordability standpoint. And it's complex, but it is beginning to become more of a competitive disadvantage for Nashville compared to 10 years ago. If we just look at the cost of living index, which is a very broad measure, but if we just look at that, we were somewhere in the about 89% of the national average a decade or so ago, and now we're right at about 98.7. So right at the national average, but that's because of housing and transportation. When you break it down into pieces, you can see that our housing costs have far exceeded, in terms of the growth, the income growth levels.
Representative Love, are you seeing any extra concern in the legislature for Nashville, or is everyone still considering us the lucky ones?
I think what we see in the legislature is a realization that the sirens and flashing lights that we put up 7 years ago about affordable housing and were ignored by those who represent a district outside of Nashville are now realizing that it's hitting their districts now. We try to tell our colleagues, let the city of Nashville keep incentivizing the building of affordable housing. Let the city of Nashville even have very strong conversations with developers about being intentional about affordable housing. And we actually had legislation to do that that was knocked down. We even talked about what's it look like to have local hire, as a referendum was passed by the citizens of Nashville to say we want to make sure that if there's a government project that 40% of the work goes to local hire. Now what is happening is I'm getting phone calls from colleagues outside of Davidson County who are saying our affordable housing stock is gone. Yes, because people who lived in Nashville have moved to your area because Nashville became too expensive, and now your affordable housing is gone in your area, and now I'm open to the conversation if you want to talk about some affordable housing legislation statewide. But it's the effect. Same thing with Medicaid expansion, right? With hospitals closing down. Same thing we warned and said, listen, it's going to affect everybody if you don't act now. And so it's taken a while, but I think there are some open conversations. My concern, though, is that we may have waited too long to act, and it may take longer to repair much of the damage that's been done.
Courtney, do you think most people who need benefits help know how to access it by now? Or, again, is there the stigma that keeps people away from assistance?
I think there's a stigma, and I also think, I'm in this world, and if I was in a situation, I think I would have to call Renee. Like, what do I do? I don't know that it's readily available, and there's 100% a stigma about it. Not just the stigma from the outside, but also from the inside. It's embarrassing. And so, yeah, I think we could probably do a better job of making that information more accessible. I think we've gotten better about that. But having a centralized, again, strategic planning and coordination among government agencies, community groups, nonprofits, all that, when you have a common goal, regardless of where you are on the spectrum, I think we should all be working together because we're all here together with the same goal. We have room for improvement there.
Let's open it up to the audience, and while you're getting to the mics, I learned a term in this report, clopening. That's when you close one job and you open the next. I can't even imagine working that many hours in that hectic a lifestyle, but it's happening everywhere.
I think we have to acknowledge that it's a multiple-pronged issue. We talk about education, the impact that poverty has on those who are getting an education. We talk about the stress, your point about opening one job, closing another, the stress of that, what effect it has on your health. Not having health insurance, does that prevent you from going to see a doctor when you first have the ache or the pain, and then when you don't go see the doctor, but then it exacerbates and you finally have to go to the emergency room? That's putting stress then on our systems, but also rising the cost of health care. It's all connected, and we got to have a conversation about this, about the impact that it's having on us. I've been living here 52 years in the city of Nashville. There was a time when the bagger of your groceries at Winn-Dixie, for those who remember that, was the teenager from Whites Creek or Maplewood or Stratford.
Mm-hmm.
It's now the senior citizen. There's something to be said about the fact that when I delivered pizzas from Pizza Hut, Clarksville Highway, I was in high school. But now you have those persons having to work in that field because they don't have the savings, they don't have the income. And we need to talk about this, and so I'm glad we have the report to start these conversations about the reality of this situation we have in our city.
I see some questions coming. Oh, how does the federal poverty level number affect us locally, which seems just almost incomprehensible, that $15,000 rate? Would getting that number more in line with reality make any difference?
It might at the state level, because...
It's tied to a lot of the things that you talk about.
Right, because we will talk about, like with TISA funding, right? When we talk about a person living in poverty or severe poverty, when we talk about the funding for our city with education, how much money we're supposed to get from the state, I think it's an issue around that. I think that the reality is, even with property taxes, right? The fact that the income was capped at $45,000 up until a year ago, when I was blessed to have members of council having talk about raising the amount to $60,000. We wanted to raise it to $80,000, but it was pushback because people heard, well, the federal poverty level is here. Why do we need to raise that high? And so I think having that raised would help us at the state level have more conversation that makes sense and are couched in reality other than old arcane numbers.
Yeah, I'm going to piggyback on, and I was very appreciative that we went from $45,000 to $60,000. Like, as I said, I have quite a few elderly in my district that don't qualify now, even at the $60,000 mark, because costs have risen so much that they're having to take out of retirement. Guess what? That adds to your income. All of a sudden, you're out. You hit the cliff. You hit the cliff. And so those numbers need to be constantly updated in order to stay in line with our cost of living. And every county is different, and that's what makes it hard, is having statewide policy in 95 counties and 95 different costs of living and living wages and all that. It makes it really, really tough to do that. And so I think we need to start having conversations more locality specific versus large land masses that you're comparing apples and oranges, and it's never going to quite work out, especially for urban areas like Davidson County, where those cost of living numbers are so high.
I'm reminded of the TISA conversations a few years ago when the state was working on the new funding formula, and how, in Nashville, we were really pushing for a deeper understanding of the higher cost of living here for teachers. And how do we differentiate that in the funding formula? And these are complex data questions, but the important thing is that policymakers and business leaders and community leaders need good data. They need good information so that they can make the best decisions possible.
And we need to be nimble as well. I think government is very, very reactive, and we're also slow to react, really slow to react. We procrastinate on a lot of things, and so we create this growing need, and all of a sudden we have an emergency, and everything has to shoot up in order to be able to pay attention to it. So I think the data is obviously incredibly important, but also the ability to respond in a very nimble way to those dynamic numbers, I think, is also really important.
From the report here, you brought up teachers. Let's talk education. 31.9% of white students and 64% of black students in Nashville attend high poverty schools. That racial disparity is just glaring. We know there are situations when access to technology is limited, kids need to learn and to compete. So what's the solution, particularly with the new landscape and vouchers?
So you dig deeper with that number when you talk about in those high poverty schools, or rather in those schools where there's a high concentration of kids in poverty.
Right.
More likely than not, you're going to have a teacher there who may not have the degree in the subject that they're teaching. These are just the numbers. And so as a result, that child may be getting taught by a teacher who, well-meaning, right, but just doesn't have the particular degree that they need for that particular subject. And now this affects that child's outcome. I will say this, that I want to applaud, though, our metro schools for what they've done. I attended a graduation last night at Nashville State where there was 22 students finishing their early college program. Some students were finishing with their associate's degree and their high school diploma the same night. A good number of students had 66 college credits, right? And they're now on their way. But we can't leave other kids behind. So to your point, with the voucher claiming to hold harmless, I'm looking down at everybody because the conversation about teachers, with the voucher claiming to hold harmless school districts by keeping the funding there, the question has to be asked, where's the money going to come from? If we're talking about the fact that in Nashville it costs, I think, $11,000 to $13,000 to educate a child, you get a $7,000 voucher, where's it going to come from, and will we be losing teachers to these other schools? It's a very much needed conversation, again, about African American students not being the place where they have teachers who are having degrees in that subject matter.
I do think we have to be realistic about the cost of educating our children. And I also want to give MNPS credit for the incredible growth that they have seen. Highest graduation rate on record, level 5 school district for 3 years in a row. They've seen achievement growth in all of their subject areas. And they've done this as a district that serves, as we mentioned, a lot of students with high needs. That economically disadvantaged number is lower than reality because it doesn't account for families that don't accept public benefits. We talked about this earlier, right? So there are families who opt out, and they wouldn't be included in those numbers. So it's actually a higher percentage. But I think it's really important to think about what we as a community can do to support the broader needs of students outside of the classroom. And that's really part of that overarching cost, is that we have students coming in who are hungry. We have students coming in who are unhoused, who have a lot of additional needs that they really need taken care of before they can learn. And we just have to we have to acknowledge that and be thoughtful about that.
The stresses on our schools, to your point, of children that are showing up hungry. I can't function if I'm hungry and I'm 46 years old. I can't imagine if I was 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years old and I'm hungry. You're not going to learn anything at that point. And we are talking about economically disadvantaged families where we've got to get them to a certain level even to be able to receive instruction. We've done a really good job, I think, post-pandemic. I think when we talk about the highest graduation rate that we've ever had, and yet the study came out that only 34% of those were considered ready graduates. That's alarming, because when we're talking about wages, we have to be ready for either that post-secondary education, or we have to be ready for the workforce, and we're not. And so also the needs that are being required of the workforce are dynamically changing, right? Computers, God bless America. I can't keep up. And so we need to start really focusing in on what are the needs of our employers, whether it's the private sector or the government. What are we doing to make ourselves more valuable? We've got companies coming in like Oracle. Oracle has told me specifically, the workforce coming out of Davidson County is not able to meet our need. We are having to pull people in from other states. Well, that's not good, because those people are going to be coming in with good paying jobs, and they're going to be able to pay for the higher cost of housing, right? It's when we say everything is related, everything is connected. I don't know if anybody's played with a PDF before, but when you move one thing and everything else messes up, that's exactly what all of this is. And so you have to be very, very careful and making sure that changing over here doesn't negatively impact over here. But we've got to be more workforce ready, obviously. That's incredibly important. My husband is a general contractor. He needs plumbers. He needs electricians. He needs carpenters. All of these skills are just diminishing the number of people that have these skills. And so you end up having to pay more for the electrician, the plumber, which makes the cost of housing that much higher, right? So vocational training, I think, is something that we really need to start focusing in on and get back to. Back in the day, my husband's 56 years old. He's like, we had shop class and it was cool. You know, we were building houses and wiring houses and plumbing houses, small, obviously. But he said, we learned how to do all of these things. And maybe we didn't want to get a job in that, but hey, it saves us from when the sink is leaking. We can fix some things, right? So I just think we've shifted away from that for whatever reason. I think we need to go back to that, because that really is sort of the meat and potatoes of the economy.
Let me ask you this. Has there been a location or a locality that's been successful in encouraging the private sector to increase these living wages? And what tactics have they used? I mean, what's possible for us to do? The mayor alluded to it at the top. It's, limited.
I mean, I will go back to the benefits cliff question, because we actually had an event with employers from multiple sectors talking about it, and many of them up until that event had no idea why their employees were turning down raises. So again, we've got to make sure they understand that, especially at that particular income threshold. There are other incentives for employers. There's Nashville Living Wage is an organization in town where employers can be certified and be listed, so it's more of a recognition standpoint. But things
there's
like
peer pressure also.
Sure,
if they see someone doing it successfully, they may jump
But
on board.
ultimately, when we talk to employers at the chamber, they want to have employees who are going to stay, who they're going to be able to retain, who they're going to be able to grow. They know that there have been wage pressures over the past few years that have increased wages. But there's a lot of other elements that we haven't talked about a lot yet, but changes in technology, automation, AI, these are technologies that are rapidly changing a lot of these occupations that hire lower wage employees. And so I think employers are also trying to figure out what's next 5, 10 years down the road, and how they can prepare individuals today to have different skills than they have today.
If I can add, I'd like to suggest that when we have conversations with businesses about increasing wage, that we need to ask them to also provide opportunities for these employees who are getting this increased pay to be financially savvy. It will do no good if the employee gets a $5 or $10 raise per hour and has no education on the benefits of life insurance, even setting aside money $25 a month for a mutual fund. Because what will happen is if you don't teach persons how to set aside money and save, I'm speaking personally, right? That my parents had to sit me down and save. When you get your paycheck, first is going your 10% to the church. That's the first thing. That's the first thing. Then you set aside 10% for yourself. You can spend the rest, but you got to save, right? And so that came about because my father was an insurance salesman as well as a legislator. He talked about the importance of life insurance. And so we got to have the conversation with employees also to say, enroll these folks in some financial literacy classes and allow us to teach folks how to save money, because that's going to start to build generational wealth that then prevents that next generation from having the same issues that their family has.
The bar graph in this report on savings just was mind-boggling.
And is that something that we should be adding to our high school curriculum? Add it to a home economics. I mean, there's so many people that don't know how to balance a checkbook. That's just simple addition and math. I mean, I think we're failing on that as well. One thing that I want to say is I think we have an opportunity to really start thinking outside the box when we start talking about matching employer needs with our workforce and having them be prepared. One of the things that we funded with ARPA funds, and you know this, and you may actually know the disposition of that better than I do, but there was a joint effort between the Nashville community, Nashville State, and the Urban League, where they were partnering with major employers within the county that had specific skill sets they were looking for. And they said, match us up with the students. We will teach them what they need to know so that then we can employ them. I don't know what happened to that. I think that program fell short of our hopes and expectations, not because it wasn't a good idea. I just think maybe we had some challenges with execution. But that's the kind of thing that we need when we're talking about everyone coming together with a common goal, have a strategic plan, and coordinate to be able to meet the need of these employers. They're willing to pay if you can fulfill their need. We've got to be able to fulfill the need.
And since we are here in this space, I also want to give a shout out to Uprise and the opportunity that employers have to partner directly with community-based organizations like Uprise, like Goodwill, like we talked about the Advancing Workforce Equity with the Urban League and Nashville State. Having those types of one-on-one partnerships allows employers to tap into training opportunities so that they can upskill, reskill their employees, and then that provides them with that next upward economic mobility opportunity.
We've got about 10 minutes left, but I want to ask this one because this is a great question from someone in the audience. If you had a magical policy wand and could change one policy with no political ramifications, what would you change, and how would you provide real solutions? Representative Love?
Guaranteed basic income. I'm a movie fan of things that are close to reality. In a movie called The Matrix, the society of machines needed an energy source. And so they had human bodies that produced enough heat and energy, but believed that they were someplace else other than in these structures. The machines survived off of the energy produced by these bodies that were in an illusion that they were someplace else. Our society, unfortunately, the reality is built on an illusion. We like to have a certain level of workers that are kept at a certain wage. Because somewhere in our thinking, if they make more, it comes from us. And so I can't pass policy that'll allow someone to require a business to pay a living wage because it might take from that CEO's golden parachute. And so we are living in an illusion because we're making folks think that we want them to make more money. But we got to make the hard decisions and stop draining the energy off of these workers at low wages. I've seen it before. Went to South Africa. Got Lamborghini and Porsche dealerships on the street. But the restaurant waiter is making the equivalent of $2 or $3 American. But it's a Lamborghini dealership. They'll never be able to get it. Because the society there creates this illusion that they can somehow get up there. And so with a guaranteed basic income, at least you make sure that a person can get at a certain level of income until they get to the place where they can get that job that also gets them at a certain level of income. So if I could pass that, I'd sponsor it next year.
Courtney, wave your wand.
So I think the most impactful things would happen at the state level when we talk about, Medicaid expansion and these benefits cliffs and things like that. So that's really hard. From the local level, I think I would have to focus in on some policy around education and curriculum additions to help with our students to make them more workforce ready, and to not allow people to be just graduated out of the system when they are not ready. And so what do we need to do to prevent that and to help these students be more ready? From a policy perspective, I don't know. It's also frustrating because I don't have any control over school policy. I think that's a huge misnomer that the mayor or the council has anything to do with education policy. That is not the case. We are just a funding mechanism. But I think when we're talking about wages and workforce and all that, gosh, that starts at our schools. So we have to make sure that our schools are incredibly successful and that our students are coming out ready to go. So that's where I would focus. But it's from the local level, it's kind of hard.
So for me, it would be that transitional benefit. So instead of individuals, when they increase their income, being worse off financially, that we would set our benefit system up so that they would never be worse off financially, and they would therefore be incentivized to take that promotion, incentivized to take those extra hours or to get a new job that would be better for their families.
Just one thing, there are, and Darren Hall, I don't know if anyone is watching our budget hearings, probably not a lot of you, but one of the things that Darren Hall pointed out yesterday that was incredibly, we've got a lot of antiquated stuff. And one of the things in our charter requires that if you are working more than, I think it's 19 and a half hours, we have to provide health insurance, pension, all that fun stuff. Our workforce doesn't necessarily care so much about that right now. They would rather have a higher wage and be able to work more hours than to have to worry with they should be worried about their retirement, again, financial literacy. But it's things like that that could be updated to meet the needs of the current workforce that I think we should be looking at too, that would allow these folks to work more hours, earn more money, but they can't do that right now. So that's one change that we could make. It's a charter revision. It would have to go on the ballot, but that's something we could do.
And the last question from the audience relates to our marching orders, I guess. What is the plan to get the partners and people who make decisions on the income gap in the same room to hear the raw numbers and data and to make important life-changing decisions for the struggling locals? What do we do with all this information, and how do we get it in every household?
It's really hard to get people motivated to be proactive about something. We always wait until it's an emergency and we're reacting, and by that time it's too late. And so I think really being intentional about our community outreach on what the problem is and that there can be a solution. I think people get really frustrated because it is complicated. It's all related. It all affects, one thing affects 15 other things. And so you get frustrated and you just go, well, there's no answer and I just need to get another job or whatever it is. There are answers, and it is going to take everybody coming to the table to be strategic and to coordinate, have that common goal, and figure out how each piece of the puzzle can move towards that goal together.
I think if we take a step back and divide the report into certain sections and say, what one thing can we tackle first? That way we have measurable goals.
Prioritize.
Right. So maybe the measurable goal is to reduce the number of African American students in school where there's concentrated poverty, right? So then you say, okay, well, let's get the Metro Schools director, and then we can get with the business community and say, how can we work the situation out? Move to the next thing. Then maybe the next thing is savings, right? So how can we engage our financial systems in the city and all these wonderful businesses that do financial services and provide a year or two of free financial literacy classes, include some in high schools, right? So now we've knocked that down. But I think if we try to take it all at once, we're going to be disappointed because it's going to be too much. You've got to take it one step at a time. So we also can have some small victories, and then that'll encourage us and inspire us to move forward.
I was joking with Dr. Garrett Harper during the break that we need to put him on a road show. So that's what I would suggest. But also, the Chamber just took a leadership study mission visit to Charlotte a few weeks ago. And one of the things that came up in every single session was a study that had been done by Raj Chetty on economic mobility, where Charlotte was ranked 50 out of 50 for economic mobility. And we were actually 43rd. And then they increased to 38, we increased to 27. But when they were ranked 50 out of 50, that became their rallying cry as a community. And across all sectors, it broke down their silos that we were talking about earlier. They all came together to tackle this issue. For us, we ranked 43rd, but it wasn't a blip on our radar. So I do think there's this question of what is that goal, what is that stat, what is going to get us motivated to really come together to tackle maybe that first issue, but do it in a unified manner.
I'd like to thank you all for your contributions and your valuable ideas that you've shared this morning, and the work is just beginning. And turn it over to Renee again. Renee Pratt.
I really hate for the conversation to end. It's a lot of information, I know, but it's a lot of good information. And what I do know is we're living in uncertain times, but as the Director of Metro Social Services, I can assure you that we will continue to convene groups and bring people together to have these conversations, to hopefully pull some of that low-hanging fruit down and see results for our people and our constituents here in Nashville, Davidson County. Our esteemed panelists, I was very fortunate to ask all of you because you all are vital in our community and make a difference. So well done, and thank you so much for attending today. To Demetria Kaladimos, I'm a native Nashvilleian, and I fanned out. I really did. If y'all don't know what fanned out means, I just gushed over her. It was like, I watched you as a little girl. I said, I don't want to date ourselves with our age, but she was just so instrumental in so many young women's lives here in Nashville, Davidson County. So thank you so much for what you do for this city. Also to Mayor O'Connell, our council members, and all of you, please know and understand that we are committed to continue to produce reports that lets you know what's going on right here in Davidson County and how we can make a difference. Right now, the full report is about to be released on our website. You can go to the full report at metrosocialservices.gov, and you can pull up the complete report. We also have a 4-page summation of the report out in the lobby for you as well. So please pick that up. So without any further ado, that will conclude our event today, and thank you so much for attending. Thank you.
This has been a service of the Metro Nashville Network. If you would like to see this presentation again, or for more information on this and other programs, visit nashville.gov.